Hello and welcome to Agony Aunt and Uncle.
Hello.
We are on podcast. Or if you would like to have a look at us, you can go over to the Sawalha-Adderleys on YouTube and we upload the video there. And also, I listen to a lot of podcasts. I said to Mark the other day, we never say, can you subscribe to our podcast?
Because
Like never.
Can you subscribe to a podcast? I don't know. Can you do it? I mean, you can subscribe to YouTube, but can you subscribe to a podcast? Oh, I didn't realise
So
that.
if you do enjoy our podcasts, we really do them just for love. I mean, there's no other reason we do them, but so it'd be nice if you subscribed and shared, and so other people could join our little community here.
Oh, there you go.
So Agony Aunt and Uncle, what is it? If you come here every week, you'll know what it is. It is basically us sat at our kitchen table giving the kind of feedback that we would if a friend or if one of our daughters came and asked us for advice. We don't come from a professional standpoint. And, you know, we read every single one of your questions, and some of them are so heartbreaking, but they are beyond us. And it needs, more professional help. So we really only do choose questions, problems where we might have had a bit of an experience, so we can kind of just share our experience rather than say, do this, do that, do this. We wouldn't do that. We're not qualified to do that. And in fact, even therapists don't tell you what to do they? They'll often say, have you noticed that with therapists when you say, well, what shall I do? And they say, I can't tell you that. And you think, oh, Christ.
Well, the weird thing is some therapists just don't say anything.
Some of them don't say anything. They just sit there and you just have to talk. So,
and if you're a people
that's
pleaser,
us.
it's a bloody nightmare.
Yeah.
Anyway, okay, so do you want to kick off?
No, you go first, because I've just spoken for ages.
Oh, right, okay. Well, I don't have the names, if there are any, of anyone here, so I'm just going to say that everyone's anonymous. A couple of years ago, my husband started to have violent rages. He would get very angry, and although he never hurt me, he would throw things against a wall and say really hurtful things. God. He has always suffered from depression, but is a kind, gentle soul, so his behaviour broke my heart and it scared me. After one emotional outburst, he visited our GP and was referred to a psychiatrist. He was diagnosed with bipolar 2. With medication, he's a lot more like himself again, and our lives have returned to some kind of normal. However, I live in fear of the rages returning. He talks about us having arguments and how we get on better now, but he doesn't seem to take responsibility for his behaviour. I actively avoided any confrontations when he was unwell, but he sees me as complicit. I have fears for our future. Any advice would be very welcome.
Well, yeah, I've been thinking about you this morning. I read this earlier on the way back on the train, and I was thinking, first of all, just both of our hearts go out to you. For those that don't know, Mark was diagnosed with bipolar 2 years ago, is it, Mark?
2 years ago now.
But obviously, and as his psychiatrist told him, he'd been actually struggling and trying to manage the bipolar on his own from probably about 7-8 years old. And I think for me, when I heard that, that really gave me, real sympathy, and has allowed me to bite my tongue many times when I felt that Mark has been more curt or more irritable or more negative than I know he even knows he's being. Like, he doesn't, or he's struggling. You'll be struggling. I can see when you're struggling, because now you're on medication, you kind of have these dips, don't you? And not very lows and very high dips, but I can see them coming, and I know that that's going to be a stressful time for you and for me, but it's still going to be worse for you than it is for me, because I'm not going into a depression. But that doesn't mean that it's not really, really difficult, and it's all right to acknowledge that. And I hear what you're saying about the way that your husband just wants to move on. It's really strange. When Mark came out of rehab, and it was like, Mark, you were very much on the pink cloud of sobriety, and it was like everything that I'd wanted.
Writing notes.
But it was really strange for me, because I almost felt resentful. I almost felt like this anger that, we're just supposed to move on, and yet I've got all this stuff in me that I just feel sad about, that I feel angry about, that I feel... And yet I then felt like I was being a horrible person for even thinking that, because now, you know, Mark was working so hard on his issues and his struggles and his mental health. I almost felt there was no place for me to feel anything that I was feeling. So I think that's what I'm picking up, that there may be some similarities there in what you're feeling. I didn't really understand the line about complicit.
No, I didn't. No.
I don't really know what you meant about that, so I can't really sort of give you anything back
Maybe
about that.
complicit in any confrontations that they do have.
Or what, that you were part of the reason for his rages.
Yeah.
Well, what I would say to that is, who knows? We don't know what your situation is, but I don't think anyone has the right to make somebody else feel frightened. And I'm hearing, though I could be wrong, that it sounds like you found it frightening, and now you're walking on eggshells in case that could ever happen again. And so maybe, and I do say this quite often, so please forgive me, but I do think it's quite a good tool, because I think that, I was talking to my daughter about this morning actually, as humans, we do tend to react rather than respond. And you know, you meet those people, and none of us are those people, are we, in our family, that just go, oh, let me just think about that a moment before I answer you. Mark and I are very much reactors, very much, we react to everything. And I don't know whether your husband is one of those people that reacts in an immediate way to defend himself and probably doesn't really hear what you're trying to say. So how about you write to him, it can be a text, a letter, a card, whatever, and you say, listen, and start off with, I'm so proud of you and the way that you've worked so hard with and it must have been so awful for you going through what you're going through, and I'm over the moon that now, you know, there's some kind of regulation going on in everything of your moods. But I just wanted to say that I am carrying a bit of the residuals of what happened at our darkest time. And I really want to reach out to you and say that I feel quite fearful that those rages can come back. And I say this with no blame, but do you think we could have a conversation where you might be able to just allay those fears a bit, or we have some sort of agreement that if you feel that you're going that way, you could actually say to me, I can feel this rising, I'm going to take myself away, I'm going to go for a walk, and just try that. But I really would recommend writing it down so he's got time to process it before he reacts. Because everybody wants to defend themselves, don't they? I mean, it's just human nature. He could very lightly go into, well, you know, that time he might have embarrassment about it. He might be feeling so bad about it, and he'll want to apportion some blame to you. Take all blame out of the conversation and just try and tell him genuinely how you're feeling.
Yeah, I mean, you know, you start your sort of letter, if you like, talking about violent rages. And I mean, you know, violence is never acceptable. Violence is never justifiable. Violence is, you can...
Or do you think you meant physically violent?
You can...
Sorry, can I just pause you? Because I didn't... Oh, if it's physical
No,
violence...
she says he would get angry, and that although he never hurt me, would throw things against the wall.
Yeah, sorry.
You know, violence of any form is unacceptable. It's wrong. And yet, we would be burying our head in the sand if we didn't try and understand where those feelings come from or why they're happening. And I think it sounds like, obviously you say he suffered from depression. He's a kind and gentle soul, so his behaviour broke my heart and scared me. So obviously you have a knowledge of him that's much more intimate than what we could ever get a grasp of. And you know that he is this kind and gentle person, and I imagine that in many regards throws in its own way a bigger spanner in the works, because if someone's lovely but you're dealing with just their negative behaviour, and I'm sure Nadia would relate to that, that must be really challenging. It must be really challenging. So he shouldn't be doing what he's doing, and it's about, well, how can we make sure that doesn't happen again? Because you talk about your fear, you talk about being scared. You'll also be scared for him, obviously, as well, because you care for him and you love him. It sounds like his diagnosis and the medication he's on has pulled him towards a more sort of a calmer place, so that he's not having as many outbursts. I would partly, I would almost, float out the thought that given that he's been reined back from that volatility, there may be some aspect of it being useful to, I'm not suggesting couples counselling, but as Nadia says, you've kind of got an opportunity here to potentially grapple with some of this stuff without the fear of him, flying off the handle in some way. So, as you rightly said, perhaps writing a letter to him, an email, something, or talking. I mean, if, he's a nice guy and he's much calmer, maybe just talking gently about it, not in an accusatory manner. I think it's really important if someone's done something wrong and it's tied up with, it's tied up with their mental health issue or potentially with their mental health issue. But I just want to say and make an important point there. I do sometimes worry, and it's very difficult for the partner of someone struggling with an acute or severe mental health issue. I do worry that sometimes, and we had this conversation the other day, I do worry that sometimes there can just be not bad behaviour, but there can be behaviour that's unacceptable or disagreeable that isn't necessarily caused by whatever the mental health condition is that they're going through. And it's quite hard to kind of, disentangle all of that, which is why I think, given that the diagnosis and the medication has calmed him down, it would suggest to me that it is attached to that in some way. So I would say that there does need to be some sort of discussion about how you can make sure this doesn't happen again. I'm presuming your fears for the future are how you can be in a more sort of calmer, more fluid, less volatile sort of, perspective to each other. Something that you said at the beginning there, Nads, which I sometimes wonder about, certainly been wondering about it for the last week, is you say, obviously, when you were talking about my sort of dips or what have you, and the dips that still come with medication, they're nowhere near as acute, but they're there. Sometimes they're not dips because of my mental health condition. They're dips because I feel fucking depressed about something that day. Do you know what I mean? And so there's that difficult dividing line between just feeling something and feeling something because of something. I don't know. So that's difficult. But I do worry sometimes that there's a sort of, not tyranny, but there is in this modern world a sort of tyranny of mental health where it's perceived that whoever is struggling with their mental health has it worse than the other person. Why do we say that? Why do we say that? Because yes, of course, it's difficult for that person, but there's no league table here. It's intensely difficult, and if not more difficult for the person alongside that person, because there's nothing they can realistically do about it. They can't take medicine. They can't. You are sat captive to whatever works for the person that you're in love with. So the reason I'm saying that is, don't feel bad about feeling bad. Do you know what I mean? Don't feel that you haven't got the space to feel what you're feeling and you're feeling of fearfulness and all this kind of stuff. It does sound to me like you've reached a calmer place, and I think obviously embedded in wherever you're at now, I think will be the potential solutions for a sort of calmer future. But yeah, I mean,
And I'd like to say as well, Mark and I recently, a few weeks ago, did a very long, in-depth interview with Bipolar UK. But what Mark and I really found from that chat was, both of us, we realised we'd never spoken to anyone else with Bipolar 2. And the psychiatrist that we were talking to has Bipolar 2. And so then, since then, I've been looking up Bipolar UK, what kind of support that they have on offer. And they have group meetups for families and loved ones of people with bipolar 2, and also for people with bipolar 1 or 2, and also for people with bipolar. So that and they do Zoom meetups. So I would say, if I had my time again, I wish I had reached out and found out a bit more 2 years ago, because we have been absolutely on our own with this. We don't talk in depth to anyone else outside of ourselves. We don't talk to our family, because people only want to hear for 2 minutes and then they move on. And friends, just what can they say? Because they've got no experience of it. So you do keep it to yourself. And I find that very lonely sometimes. And that's why I really did want to read out this message, because I think there'll be a lot of people that we had our light bulb moment, and hopefully our light bulb moment has helped somebody else have a light bulb, because there's nothing like a problem shared with other people that understand. So really, I would highly recommend check out Bipolar UK. They're a small charity, aren't they, Mark? But they do a lot of work.
Really useful. I just quickly, just as a final thing, the sentence where you say he doesn't seem to take any responsibility for the behaviour. I just want to just take the heat out of that, because I get that, I understand that. He might not be taking responsibility for it, not because he doesn't want to, or because he's trying to dodge something or escape something or get away with something. He might have just a genuine lack of awareness as to how upsetting it's been or how upsetting he was.
That's what the psychiatrist said, didn't he? He said, I can be really mean to my wife and
Absolutely.
I actually don't even know I'm doing it.
Yeah. So that's really hard for the person left behind, because, of course, you know, that can breed resentment. You want an apology, you want an acknowledgement, you want recognition and what have you. I mean, it's so fraught, isn't it, with what is the nuanced details of your relationship and how are you in any given moment? Because whatever your relationship is like today, it won't be like that tomorrow. Mine and Nadia's isn't the same today as it was last week. So, you know, depending on where you're at with each other, we can't tell you the best way to judge a moment. You know how agony art columns often say, you know, sit him down and have a chat. Well, hang on a minute. You can't just sit him down at any old time. You've got to, the timing has to be right. So all I would say is slightly try and take the heat out of feeling that unless he takes responsibility, we can't move forward. He might be ashamed. He might be embarrassed. Sometimes I don't want to flag up or return to behaviour of mine because I'm embarrassed about it and I feel bad about it. And that, in a weird way, by not talking about it and feeling bad about it, is his way of trying to make amends and push on again.
And that's why it's important for you to voice your feelings and say, I just need us to talk about this. This isn't about me wanting to beat you up over it. It's just I need us to talk about it before I can fully move on.
Exactly.
And we send you so much love and so much understanding. One last thing. I remember when Mark was first diagnosed and there's lots of people talking about the medication. Oh, it can take 18 months for the medication to get the right balance. And we were like, yeah, no, that won't happen for us. But actually, it does take a long time for many, not for everyone, to get the right balance of the medication. So also be aware of that this medication is playing with the chemicals of his brain. And so, like, I have given Mark a lot of leeway on that because I think, well, actually, if you think about it, his poor brain is going, is trying to recalibrate. So there is a bit of that as well to take into consideration. But yeah, we send you lots of love.
And maybe suggest him some kind of talking therapy as well to say alongside his medication.
And if not, Bipolar UK, because I think everything there is free.
Yeah.
So is it me?
Yeah.
Okie dokie. Right. How would you move on from a toxic, codependent relationship? And one of the reasons I've chosen this particular problem is I know that this will be relevant for so many people because we always get, whenever we discuss anything like this on Coffee Moaning, which is our morning show we do on YouTube every day, so many people like messaging and so. So what are some tips on letting go? I am in love with this person. We dated on and off for 2 years long distance. We've met. I travelled to see her in Canada. It was special, but we argued a bit. Prior to that, it was a toxic cycle of push and pull. I thought being with each other in person would solidify our bond a bit better, but it didn't really. Although we seemed to get on better in person, how would you deal with letting go? Would you fight for your first love? If you're done, are you truly done?
So is the dilemma here how to stay with the person? Should they stay with the person?
It's interesting, isn't it? My mum always used to say, I think if you have to ask if you're supposed to be with somebody, you're probably not supposed to be with somebody.
Right. Yeah.
And I agree and I disagree with that. Because I think actually often what people are asking is there any way this can be fixed? And we always say on paper, our relationship, you wouldn't have thought it could work. We were both chaotic. We were both a mess. We both fallen in and out of other relationships. There was a lot of jealousy on your part in the beginning, and there was a lot of messed up thinking on my part. We were a mess, right? And so, though I don't mind sharing that, I'm also really wary of that too, of sharing that, because I worry that people will look at us and say, oh, well, they were a complete mess. And look, they've got a good relationship, which we have. But we are both people that are committed to working on it, are committed to being honest with each other, have been committed to facing some heavy shit with each other, are committed to fidelity and all of those other things. So there was the chaos, but also the shared values and the absolute knowledge that we weren't playing games with each other's feelings. We would often hurt each other within our struggle to try and make the relationship better. So when you actually, if you were to analyse it in a lab of relationships, though it was chaotic, the ground of it was, we are going to make this work and we are going to try and listen to each other. Whereas if some of those components had been taken out, so say we had all the challenges that we had, but one of us was like, you know, playing games and not being available and not letting the other one know whether they really wanted to be with them, or kind of seeing somebody else, or undermining that other person. You put any of that into that already unstable situation and it would have been horrific. And believe me, at times our relationship, both of us, have caused real pain to each other, but never with any toxicity, never with bringing anyone else into it, never with, you know, storming off and not coming back. There was a commitment. And that, to me, is a very important part, because we can't totally answer this question because we have no idea of what the ins and outs are. But I would say to you, ask yourselves these questions. Because just rowing a bit always happens. We row loads. You know, you've seen each other. I think when you've had a long distance relationship, you can build it up into a perfect ideal, and then you could see each other and it could be like, oh, well, that's a bit annoying when then they do that. I mean, there's plenty of things that are very annoying when you will spend a lot of time with somebody. And so a committed couple will work their way through them. So ask yourself, is there commitment to work through the problems? Is there a genuine, do you like each other? You might say you love each other, because love is an easy thing to bounce about. You might fancy each other. Do you like each other? Would you choose this person's company? Do you share the same values? You know, are you, you know, it's like little things. We were talking about this on Loose Women the other day. So, and one of the Loose Women was saying that she was going out with this guy and she really liked him. And then they passed by a beggar on the street. And he said something derogatory about this person and just expected that this friend of mine was going to think in exactly the same way that she did. And she said it was fundamental. I realised the values were so different. She was saying, I could never have spoken about somebody that's like on their knees, you know, begging. So are your values aligned? And I think all those questions are ones you can ponder over and then start to make a decision.
Okay, for those of you watching, you'll probably notice I've been bathed in sunlight, so I'm struggling actually to focus on anything. How would you move on from a toxic codependent relationship? There's so much in that. Toxic codependent relationship. Codependency is a profoundly difficult, complicated concept. You know, if you go into it in any detail, every relationship necessarily becomes to some degree codependent by the simple fact that you are in any way dependent on each other. I mean, I think probably the ideal is that you're looking for interdependent or, you know, independently together type thing. But I think we'd all be absolutely lying if we didn't say that a relationship of any form has an aspect of codependency in it. It's about that staying at a healthy level. Now, and therein lies, you know, the trouble there is, you know, the devil is in the detail. What's, you know, codependent to one person isn't going to be codependent to someone else. You also use the word toxic, and unfortunately, I think the word toxic is something that's used I'm not suggesting this is what you're doing, by the way, but I think the word toxic is used a lot at the moment around things like toxic masculinity, toxic femininity. And again, toxicity in a relationship is tricky because
It's so subjective, isn't
it's
it?
not only subjective. So one person's toxic isn't, believe it or not, necessarily someone else's. That's habitually what they've learned. That's how they are, that, you know, through no sort of malicious intent or anything like that. But it feels toxic to the other person on the other end. I mean, one of the things that screams out from this, because you're also talking about how to move on and how to let go, is doing a little bit of that thing that you do in 12-step programs, which is analysing and exploring how this relationship sits alongside other relationships you've had. Are there parallels? Are there similarities? Not just in the type of person this is and other people you've been with, but also in the way that you conduct yourself in the relationship. Because you might find that actually that toxicity that you're talking about isn't necessarily toxic, but you draw something out of people, or you're drawn to people with a certain thing because perhaps you want to hurt yourself in some way. You know, there are so many complicated reasons why we end up in the kinds of relationships that we do. And me and Nadia have gone through so much of this. Why do we end up with, enablers, helpers, love avoidance? There's so many different things that you will be bringing to the equation too. How do you move on? Well, without wishing to just say there's a 12-step program for everything, if you are truly codependent, if you see patterns in your relationships, and whilst this might be the most toxic so far, so you identify it as that, but all of them have some element or aspects of what you're going through or what you went through with this person, it might be worth checking out a CODA meeting, Codependence Anonymous, because they will walk you and talk you through 12 steps of recovery, like alcohol, which will encourage you to explore...
It's addiction, isn't it?
It's addiction, yeah. It will help you explore the patterns in your own indulgence of it, if you like. So are there frequent acts of codependency that you engage in? Do you ask for certain things of that person? Do you only live through what that person does? Do you have your own? Do you maintain your own social circles? Do you only live through their social circles? Do you seek to control their social? There'll be all these things that they will walk you through and talk you through. So it might be really helpful.
Maybe Mark, just give a couple of sentences on what a CODA meeting is, because we know so much about meetings, don't we? But for a lot of people, there's this fear that they're going to have to go in, stand up, tell their whole story.
No, I'm of the opinion that everyone has a codependent aspect to them, even if you completely avoid everyone. I mean, I sometimes, and this is terrible because I shouldn't, I hear about marriages and relationships where the two people may as well be work colleagues. They literally just get on with their lives, and there's no enmeshment for me that kind of is the interesting gooey stuff of a relationship. Now, of course, that enmeshment can mushroom to unhealthy levels. But if you were to walk into a CODA meeting, there's one down the road from here, there'll be 6 to 12 to 14 people sat in a room. You'll go in, they'll welcome you, you'll have a cup of tea, you'll sit on a sofa, there'll be a chair, someone will say, right, welcome, they'll probably read through some aspect of the 12-step program, which they do in AA. There might be someone else there alongside them who's going to share in their story. And I think this is the most important thing about 12-step meetings. Everyone thinks religion, forget all that. You will go in and you will get to hear a case study, which is a huge privilege, because you will get to hear someone telling their story. And you might not even know stuff about your own relationships that you will hear and you go, oh my God.
A bit like what we were saying previously with the bipolar thing.
Exactly,
Hearing other people's stories.
Yeah.
Is just such a powerful tool.
And so something that's very normal for you in any relationship may suddenly become quite starkly, you'll realise in quite a stark fashion, like, that's the problem. That's what I'm doing. And of course, you're hearing from someone who generally has been, it's not sober because it's not alcohol, but codependency is about an addiction to sort of, the
numbing your feelings. It's about numbing your feelings.
But it's also the unhealthy aspects
of
exactly. It's filling the holes in yourself through the conduit or lens of someone else. So
and they don't cost anything. No, you can put 50p in for a cup of tea if you want.
Go online and you can find where your local meeting is.
And at the moment, with so much therapy being unavailable or unaffordable, these amazing charities and groups that give support to people are much needed. And I think you've got one for me on ADHD. I've got it here. I don't have the name of this person. Your greatest ADHD hacks on ADHD medication. So this lady here is on the same medication as I've spoken about in the past, and she says that she's still managing to procrastinate, and I need motivation to organise my house life. Okay. I love ADHD people. So is
this a question? What are your greatest ADHD?
What are my hacks on how? Because she's having the medication, but she's still like completely disorganized. Now, I think you have to go hand in hand, and I will be moving towards not being on the medication eventually, or not taking it as often as I do. And actually, I was talking to somebody about this yesterday. What I'm trying to do is recognise what I do when I have the medication, how I'm able to just focus in on things, how I'm able to stay with things. Now, the thing is with the medication is that it can give you focus, but you could shift that focus to your phone, and you could spend all day on your phone, or you could spend all your day on something that you didn't necessarily want to get done that day. So my advice is to write out a list of what you want to achieve that day, not an unachievable amount. So don't say, I want every single, cupboard in my house sorted out. Don't do that. Give reasonable, I've got to go. It's the doctor. Sorry, the doctor rang then. You can't miss your doctor's call, can you? It's so hard to get a doctor's appointment. So yeah, I was just saying, I think that you also have to get a plan in place. You can't just take this pill and then suddenly everything's going to be all right. So I tend to get now, okay, I want to say, for instance, I want to make that call that I was supposed to make. I want to write this email. I want to get this cupboard cleaned out, whatever it is, and give myself a little list of what I'm going to do, and then promise myself with each thing that I'm doing that I don't get pulled away. Because what I've found is with the medication, it's not that you don't get distracted like you would without the medication. You get distracted, but you notice it. So say, for instance, and I'm using really like simple examples here. Say, for instance, I'm washing up. Pre-medication, I'd wash up, and then I'd think of something else, and then I'd find myself over the cupboard, and I'm doing the cupboard. And then I'm sorting out the cupboard, and then I find myself over at the sofa folding up a blanket. And then I'm folding up a blanket, and then before I know it, I've been working for an hour and nothing has been achieved. So now with the medication, I'm standing washing up, and I washing up, and then I start to go off to do something else, and I notice it. Whereas before I would not have noticed it. So then it's about you also using your own psychology and saying, do you see what you did there? Stay here until this is finished. And you can do that with anything you're doing, whether it's reading a book or drawing a picture or, I don't know, sorting out your filing cabinet, whatever it is. I would also really, really recommend that you follow an Instagram account called ADD Tude instead of Attitude. And they have hundreds of podcasts on every kind of subject with ADHD. It's really, really fascinating. I wish I could find a way where you can search what you want on the podcast. I don't know how to do that. But that really helped me a lot. Also, ADHD Works is another good Instagram account that gives tips on how to deal with all the different things that can come up with ADHD, like emotional deregulation and all that sort of stuff. So I read a lot about it, and then it's not that I put everything into practice, but it's in my mind, and I forgive myself more. So I no longer say, oh, I'm an idiot, I can't read a map. I don't say that anymore to myself or to others. I just say, I really struggle with reading. I've always struggled with reading maps. What I do is I always ask somebody, because I'm really good at communicating, and it's about letting yourself off. Now, do you want a house that's all perfect, Instagram perfect? You might, but you're probably not going to get it. But if you would like to just have a little bit less chaos, start with that ambition. I've got a fridge at the moment. Every time I open it, I just feel like, oh my God, I can see everything. And it's amazing. I open my cupboard, I know where my bowl's going to be if I want to whisk the cream. Now, for a lot of people, that might go, what the hell are you talking about? But for people that have ADHD, you know what I mean. To cut out the hours of trying to sift your way through everything before you can get anything done will reduce. I don't know what level you're on yet with your medication, but they very slowly increase it. And each time it's been increased, it's been better for me. I've done better, but you do have to be proactive with it. Don't just pop a pill and think that's it. That would be my advice.
Yeah, I think that's a misnomer with a lot of kind of pill taking or, you know, medication, is that you take the medication. And I mean, even me, after many years of taking all sorts of different things and being diagnosed with everything under the sun, you know, and I now have as many initials to define my mental state as I do after my name. And so, you know, even despite that history, I still sometimes think, oh, this is the magic, a silver bullet, I'm going to have this, and boom, it's all gonna solve it. I think it's really interesting what you say about you know, being mindful when you're on the drugs, taking the drugs, and allowing yourself to kind of almost interrogate what's going on whilst you're on the drugs, to sort of almost equip yourselves for future occasions where perhaps you aren't on the drugs. And in that sense, what you were describing sounded almost to me like you could describe it as a fact-finding mission on each time that you're kind of, the drugs are helping you kind of make sense of stuff. I mean, it's curious because I haven't thought about this yet. I suppose I'm still in the kind of foothills of my medication, which isn't the same as yours and Nad's, having some effect on me. It's complicated because I'm on bipolar meds as well. But, you know, if I'm honest, I don't feel like there's any lessening. I was talking to a therapist yesterday. There's no fewer ADHD things going on in my head.
But you do stick more with
one
thing.
But I do try, and I think what I'm trying to do a little bit more is be more boundaried in saying to the outside world around us, because of course we all work in the same space, we all work together, it's an open house, we live together, is either removing myself or making my space focused, or, you know, for example, I mean, it's a curious thing, but in the evenings I'm into this series, I've been saying to everyone they should watch it, but I've just been taking myself off and going and watching it on my own. I wouldn't have done that in the past. Sounds odd, but I would have tried to have done it alongside everything else, and actually I'm going, no, that's time to go and do that late at night. And also in terms of things, jobs that I'm doing, or, you know, stuff that I'm making or writing or working on, I try and kind of contain the time. I'd be lying if I said I feel I'm anywhere near where I want to be. I don't feel I am. I in many regards, I procrastinate, or just having lots and lots of really creative, interesting thoughts. I don't know.
But it's interesting because I do notice a difference in you, but almost my not my advice, I don't like to advise, but the experience I've just shared is what I would say to you as well. Because me watching you, it's easier, isn't it, for somebody else to see than what you... I mean, like, one day you have to tell me what you've noticed the difference with my ADHD medication. And I really notice a difference. You are doing things and you're knocking them off the list in a different way. But what I would say to you is exactly the same advice. Give yourself a list and cross it
But my problem
out.
is my list is so long.
No. You're not allowed to do that. You're allowed to put 4 things on the list.
No, I can't do 4.
And then cross them out.
Yeah.
No, but you see the way that you're saying, I can't.
No, because there's more than 4 things to do.
That's you not holding the hand of the medication and working together towards something. That's still you saying, I want everything to be exactly the way I want it. And I want this. No, we all do it. I'm not just saying you. I'm saying that's the thing. But actually, when you get to the point where you say, I'm going to have to put some conscious... this medication and my consciousness of it together, holding hand by hand, let's see what we can do. And I think that's a really proactive way to think of it. And I think you're moving towards it. And I think that is the last key for you. I
think maybe something that's really important there, and it also slightly is relevant to the story about codependency. And it's something that I'm thinking about a lot again at the moment about alcoholism, is... it's easy to think that these conditions or our experiences or our mental states can just be solved by either going to a meeting or sitting with a therapist or taking a drug or whatever, or listening to podcasts or whatever. It requires you... one huge part of it, which I fall foul of failing to recognise, is you've got to put the legwork in yourself. And I think what you said is really useful.
Don't be a
Nadia.
passenger.
Yeah, it's really useful what you just said. Don't be a passive taker of your drugs, as I've just demonstrated. I want my cake and I want to eat it.
I can't do that because I want to do loads.
So I hear that. I've heard that literally in real time here, and I've rationalised that. So
yeah, it's like I wanted to get every single bit of my house sorted out. Take a chill pill, Nadia. That is not you. What can you achieve? What can this help you with? Be realistic, and who knows what could happen.
There you go.
Oh, wow. Do you know what? I really love doing these podcasts because
it's so helpful.
When we share with you, we share back on ourselves, and that's the best kind of thing. It really helps us dig deeper into us at the same time and like learn other things about ourselves. So, thank you for sharing things that are, very personal and deep and meaningful to you with these two idiots.
And if you have any other issues that you want to share, obviously Nadia does a call out each week on her Instagram, but the link will be below this in the description box. Do feel free to go there. You can be anonymous. It's kind of nice if you could pop your age, because it's useful sometimes.
Really helps us.
If you're listening, that's if you're on YouTube. If you're listening to this, obviously whatever platform you're listening on, I didn't know you could. Subscribe if you can. Hit the stars if you like it. Leave comments if you want.
And please subscribe on the YouTube channel as well, because we put our heart and soul into everything that we do, and that subscribe button that doesn't cost anything, and that pushing it out to other people is really what you could do back for us. We'd love that.